Welcome back to 68 Cups of Blueberry Tea, where we explore the story behind the story. Today, I'm sitting down with Burgett Herman. In her newly released novel, Birgit delivers the 7 Shifts of Boulder, translating lessons from deserts, oceans, and real-world leadership into grounded, actionable, bolder ways to lead. She runs ultramarathons in extreme environments, like the Sahara and Antarctica. She's lived and worked in remote communities to understand how people adapt to climate realities, far from boardrooms and buzzwords. Burgett is also a freediver, the kind who descends underwater on a single breath. There's a pattern here. Again and again, Burgett places herself in environments where comfort disappears. No oxygen, no shade, no familiar system to lean on. So today isn't about performance or polished frameworks. No. It's about those edge moments. Not pushing harder, but digging deeper. When stepping out of your comfort zone, what it strips away. What does it mean? What does it reveal? Because when comfort dies, something else shows up. And I want to know what that something is. Let's go. Birgit, thank you for joining me. One day we are cycling, and then the next day I am signing up to your freediving course. And now here we are podcasting together to celebrate the launch of your book. Congratulations, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. Very excited to be here.
Yes. Let's start with the book, which has been years in the making. Reading it feels very, very lived. So thank you for sharing all your experiences and bringing it all together. But why now? When did it become something that needed to be articulated?
That's a big question. Let's go straight in.
Straight to it.
So I think writing a book is something. So I would say I had always quite a curious life and lifestyle, and I was always seeing what is out there in the world. How can I push myself a little bit outside my comfort zone? Like I was always very explorative in a way of really seeing how far can you go on all levels, like on the world map, or how far can your body go, and what does it take to actually make it happen? But with all of those things, it's always like you don't just start with the longest distance ever. You actually have like some goal, a smaller step, and then, that actually worked quite well. And then I went from there and added. And they were, throughout the years, there were actually a few people asking, Birgit, you should write a book. And I was like, well, that sounds like a great idea. I was a bit like, oh, okay, noted. But I wasn't really like, okay, and what would that book be about? And I quite liked sharing my experiences on social media. So that's probably actually where I get a bit more into this idea of actually sharing something. So 10 years ago is when the first time when I went to Timor-Leste. And at that time, it was a volunteer stint, and I was raising a bit of money for the initiative. And there I had a public-facing Facebook page for the first time. And that was actually utterly terrifying to know that suddenly what I'm posting is read by people who I don't know. Because I was always before like sharing stories from traveling, sharing stories from doing like some events or big hikes or things like that. But then suddenly it turned a little bit by actually being on a public facing thing. And this was really nice because I got great feedback. And it was a small community. I wasn't thinking I'm becoming an influencer or anything. It was just like, my idea was that it was in the year 2026. Sorry, no, that's this year. It can't be 2016. And my idea was to raise $2016. And so I had the idea of cycling or running 2016 kilometers. So that's where I was like also like giving like a little accountability updates on how it's going. Yeah. So it helped me also stay motivated. But then I got that feedback back from people actually really finding it interesting and finding a then suddenly I heard people where actually they hadn't moved in a long time. They got their shoes out and they were active themselves. And I was like, oh, okay, that's unexpected. That was really motivating for me as well. So a double thing, like I inspired others and they inspired me to keep on going. And I think really that was the first time where I played with the thought of like, okay, maybe a book one day, who knows? And 3 years ago was the time where I had been managing an organization here in Timor as the country director for 4.5 years, and the contract came up for renewal. And for me, I had been working towards enabling a Timorese to step up, so to give it to a local talent. And when the contract came up for renewal, I was very happily saying, no, that's the time to actually just really step out. And for me, I was a bit like, okay, but I hadn't actually really thought what I'm doing now for myself yet. Yeah, so it was even that on the one hand I had been planned like for this moment of handing over for so long, but I hadn't actually really 100% came up yet with this idea what I'm doing. And I had a really big physical challenge at that time, like my biggest ever. I was running through the Sahara as part of the Marathon des Sables. It's 250 kilometers self-sufficient, so you have all your food and overnight gear and everything in your backpack. So this was the biggest focus. But that's when really the book idea came up like more and more often. I was like, okay, now I'm out. I don't have a clear commitment work-wise, and I'm having this big challenge. I'm taking a bit of time for myself, and I think that now is the time to really think about the book. And that's how it really started. And then I did this massive race. It was the most amazing, the most astonishing, the most outside the comfort zone experience I've ever done. But also on the other hand, I couldn't believe how well it went for me. I at some stage during that week, I was in the top 10 from the women, and I finished as top 13, and I was just on a high. And suddenly I got podcast invitations and people asking me about my mantra and stuff. And I was like, hey, I haven't had any of that yet. I was like, I really need to write this book because I need to put all my thoughts into something that I can eventually actually talk about. So this is a very long-winded way of saying it wasn't just like an overnight decision. And then in the last 3 years, I spent a lot of time playing around with what type of book it actually should be. Is it just an inspirational book, which I thought, that's not really what I want. I want actually people to be inspired to change their life and the world in not just like not keeping it at the inspiration level, actually really making it practical. So like, how can you actually action it? Many months of writing, playing around, working also with an author coach who helped me a little bit structuring it. I put all my thoughts together into a framework, which I think works much, much better because it has our 6 shifts. It's called Boulder. Boulder has 6 letters, so each letter is 1 shift. And it's a little bit summing up my work experiences, but actually almost more importantly, all of those experiences I had outside the workplace, where it was about pushing the comfort zone, running through the Sahara Desert, cycling the length of the African continent, going freediving in very cold water under ice without wetsuit and altitude things. So like all of those things put together, where there's a lot of lessons learned about braving the unknown and going for it. But then on the other hand, also inspiring others and working with others and leveraging this collective power to make it happen. And the R from Boulder is the most important one probably, because that's about looking after yourself and rejuvenating. So instead of just burning out, actually doing all of this pushing in a sustainable way so that the impact is lasting.
Did you put yourself at risk of burning out to complete the book?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's actually the interesting that I studied, so I did like essays and a master thesis, and I thought that was already massive. And then writing a book, especially this type of book, because it has so many personal anecdotes, lessons learned. And I'm too much of a perfectionist. I didn't want to be criticized later on about things that I actually truly believe, or I didn't want to write them down in a way that I misunderstood. Yeah. So, and then there was so much introspective time, and I'm quite an extrovert, and like the last 7 months writing, it felt like being in a cave. Yeah? And just, I needed the time. I needed the time to think about it. But it was just such a different lifestyle to what I normally have. Like I felt really disengaged with the outside world. And sometimes I really needed the time to sit down and write. And I sacrificed sometimes some of my exercise because I was like, no, I need the time now. So it's interestingly like things I wrote about in the book. But sometimes I'm like, Birgit, you're not actually doing this at the moment. so it's a bit like, yeah, a good reminder too. Like, not just preaching, but actually being the role model yourself and doing it, even if no one is looking. So sometimes I felt like I'm actually writing for myself. So as a memory checklist.
As a reminder. Well, so that was, you had mentioned you had been to a retreat for Vipassana.
Mm-hmm.
And so I haven't explored that further, but was that part of you? You say that you are an extrovert, but then there was 10 days of no talking and no engaging with the outside world. Was that part of how you came to the realization of what this book could be about? Was that part of it?
No, that was a few years prior for really planting the seed that I guess planted the seed. Yes, it had happened already, but the actual book idea developed a bit later. But this is another example of, for me, just being curious about what the body, the mind is able to do. Because a few years before that, I signed up to become a yoga instructor. I went to India and to study really at the source of Indian guru, and even that experience, a lot of my friends were a bit like, this is not for you. Like, what are you doing? Spending this month in an ashram and being all in this, because it's all very internally focused as well. But actually for me, it was the opposite. It was more the realization how important this rest, the rejuvenate, that part actually is. And yoga is still quite active, especially the type of yoga I like most is Ashtanga, which is very strength-based. So you're moving still quite a bit. It's a bit about breath and following the breath, but it's very dynamic. You're still engaging, so you can still distract your mind and cheat in a sense. And then, but through this whole yoga community, that's where I got to know more and more people who did the Vipassana retreat. Actually, retreat. Let's not call this retreat. Experience. and I was just intrigued. I was intrigued how it is not talking for 10 days. I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified that it just drives me insane, that I will become an absolute, mad person coming out of it. And there, just for those ones who don't know what it is, it's you're arriving on an afternoon, you sign a few pieces of paper to declare that you don't have any depression and other kind of clinical phases at the moment. That's because there's no clinical staff on site. It's all run by volunteers. And then you give away your phone, you give away anything to read, anything to write. And the idea is that you're focusing entirely on your own sensations. And it's a very structured program. It starts at 4 a.m. in the morning. You're doing a lot of sitting in a meditation hall on the ground, trying to stay upright, keep your eyes open and not be completely uncomfortable. But it's the idea is really to super sensitize your self-awareness of what's happening and that you're not reacting. So the typical example, as we're in Timor, we are surrounded by mosquitoes. The idea is you're feeling there is a mosquito landing on your skin, but you're not immediately just flicking it away. You're more okay, you're sensing it. You're having this aha moment. Okay, there is something happening, and then you just let it go. That was the full meditation experience, but at least for applying it later on in real life, that you actually take a moment before you react. But that's the whole what this Vipassana meditation is teaching you. It's about noticing, observing, but not reacting, and separating those two processes so that there's no automatic reaction, that you're actually just having that break in between to pause and think and then choose, rather than automatically doing it. And for me, the experience there was, I spent 1 year in Timor, and then I was 1.5 years in New Zealand, where I was looking for international roles, and I wasn't quite 100% sure in which country that would take me. And actually I had an aha moment, I think the third night. I had so clear thoughts by not having any distraction. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I knew I wanted to go back to Timor-Leste. And I had never had a sensation like this. And normally I would be kind of, excited, booking flights, things, but impossible, because I was still another 6 or so days in this environment where I had no access to the outside world. And so I felt like a child before Christmas, like just couldn't wait to get out, to actually put the steps in place to book my flight to go back to Timor-Leste. So that was, so it wasn't really setting up for the book, but there's, for everyday life, 100%, especially the whole pause and take a moment. And now in my book, I have a 4-word slogan, mantra, and that is pause, smile, and then breathe and choose.
Smile and choose.
Yeah. So it's and it doesn't matter whether you smile or breathe first. But I think I normally say more like pause, breathe, smile, choose. But the important part is just doing that breathing and that smiling before you actually do whatever you think is needed to do, rather than this automatic reaction of sometimes instinctively doing something that later on actually was maybe also not the best reaction.
Yeah, that was actually, I was taught by a former boss of mine, and she said, step away from your desk, go grab a cup of tea, go to the bathroom, do a lap around the block, and then come back and then re-engage. So I enjoy having that similar mantra. Well, back to the book though. So you have asked, and he did come through for you, the president, Ramos Horta, to write the foreword for you. And so how did that all come about? How did you just ask the president to write a foreword in your book? And
so interestingly, actually, before I even thought about a book, I was always admiring Jose Ramos Horta's leadership. I'm a Rotary Peace Fellow, and I remember the first time I applied for this Rotary Peace Fellowship, I was already talking about how I'm actually very inspired by seeing how his leadership is on the ground. I had in my first year when I arrived in Timor, I was sharing an office sounds the wrong word, but I was volunteering in an organization where he was the patron, and the office of this organization was in his office premises. And so in my first few weeks, I had an opportunity to meet him. And for me, this was quite unusual. I mean, I had lived in New Zealand and I worked in international relations there, so I had actually opportunities to meet very high VIP politicians there, but coming from a place like Germany, I haven't even been in the same city as our prime politician. So I was like, oh wow, I'm in the same office, and he's taking the time to say hello and shake hands, and was telling me there's also another German in town, giving me the phone number of this person. And so it was very unusual, especially in a very patriarchal society where it's very the hierarchy in Timor is really there, that there's still someone so human-centered, so actually really interested in who is this person who's volunteering in an organization he supports. And the other thing, what I was always a huge fan of him, was that he, as part of the independence activities and positioning Timor-Leste as a safe place, he put a lot of effort into initiating the Tour de Timor and the Delhi Marathon. And the Tour de Timor is unfortunately, it doesn't exist right now anymore. It's possibly actually this year will start again. And it used to be the most grueling mountain bike race, a 5-day race, bringing you around the country, very, very difficult terrain, and the distances and the elevation profile very top-notch. And he just had this foresight in the early 2000s to invest a lot of money into this to attract international riders and make it a really big event. So it was on the one hand sending messages out to the world that Timor is a safe place, but also it actually generated a lot of excitement in the country because the Tour de Timor went always into remote areas. So there were cyclists going through and people were on the side just lined up and cheering and being all excited that something really positive is happening after 25 years of a very violent occupation here. For me, this was just, from my personal ideals of bringing this like sport and other areas into this leadership and political arena and peacemaking. I was always very admiring his approach. And so, when I had in the very early days when I sketched out things for what you need in a book, and I was like, there's a foreword. I was actually thinking, maybe I find a way to approach José Ramos Horta. And then, of course, I forgot about it and everything else happened. And then it was time where it's like, there's actually a book is like shaping. It's like almost becoming now a proper book. Now I need to actually have a foreword by someone. And I think this was just where I was like, okay, I call my book Boulder and I say brave the unknown and I say be bold. So I was like, I guess I just need to go for it, And that's literally the short version. Like there was an occasion where I saw him at in a cafe and I was just like, okay, let's just go. And so I tied him over to this event we had at the time and asked him if he can just say a few words of farewell to the person we farewelled. And that's kind of how the interaction like developed into actually then asking him if he can contribute the foreword.
And how did he receive the invitation?
Well, I had a few helpers, of course. Like that's how you do it with presidential. So he knew about it from some other advisors and so on. And so I knew he was very open to the idea. And so it was actually a very short email line back that he's very happy.
Absolutely. And it was a great start to the book and then you carried it on very well indeed.
Yeah.
As well, so now that you have published the book, what is it that would have remained unsaid if you hadn't written it?
This is a double-layered question. And it's not an easy question. What would have remained unsaid if I hadn't? I have the feeling I probably, everything is in the book I spoke about or wrote about in some shape or form. However, bringing it all together, that is more what the book can offer and putting it into a framework rather than just telling about random stories and having some lessons learned from that story. So I think that is actually more the like closing the loop. And then it was also the I think for me I had so for anyone who has actually opened the book knows, like I'm basing it a lot on the experience of my last kind of 10-11 years. And the reason is that around 12 years ago, I made a decision to cycle the length of the African continent. And that was not just a decision of doing that, joining a small group. Some did it as a race, some as an expedition, which meant they were daily stages were given. So it was very, on average, 120 kilometers per day. And for me, I had just been a mountain biker. So going out in the bush and riding 10, 15 kilometers was a long day. So the whole signing up to a commitment of cycling every single day on average 120 kilometers, meaning there were also some that were closer to 200. It was, that was a huge step up, but also and it was a 4 months commitment. But for me, it wasn't just a 4 months commitment. I made it at least 12 months commitments. I resigned from my permanent role that I had already for over 6 years I worked for government. So no one really resigns when you're permanently engaged. So the environment around me wasn't necessarily set up in a way that this is an everyday thing. Yeah. So this was kind of a big step to actually do that. And then I lived in New Zealand at that time, already for 8 years, and I was very established. So I'm from Germany, but then at that time I had already been there for many years. And so I put everything in storage there and had really the ambition of spending an entire year on the African continent. And who knows, maybe this is actually the move to another place. So it was a really big decision. Like, it was not just the physical aspect, it was also everything else that came with it. And now I forgot what the question was.
What would be left unwritten?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then at that time, when I finished the final finish line in South Africa, in Cape Town, I had this whole like bold life by design. Like, for me, it was about maximizing your life, living your full potential, and doing this bold life by design. That was like my slogan a little, and then I used it a lot in the way I positioned myself, in the way I wrote, shared stories. I used that a lot. But the part about the book is more bringing that into a leadership environment. And by leadership, it doesn't mean someone who is in a corporate environment and in a leadership role with a title. Like that, I'm really speaking about community organizations. I'm working a lot with youth groups, like those leadership roles. Yeah, it's the everyday leadership role. It can be also someone who is, I don't know, here we have a really nice neighborhood. Yeah, those ones who are leading the neighborhood interactions. Yeah, but really putting it more into something quite useful. I have a lot of reflective questions in this book as well, for self-reflection and putting things into practice and thinking about, okay, this is maybe the bigger thing, but then what can I do today to make a difference? And I think that's the nice thing about the book, that it's bringing all of those different things from my professional experience, from my coaching background. That's actually the other thing that happened in the last 3 years since I left this country director role, is that I upgraded a lot and did a lot of upskilling in becoming a professional certified coach. And there's so much about asking the right questions so that people do self-reflection and come to solutions themselves about how to make a change, make a difference. And by the end of the day, it's all about your mindset. And I'm really hoping that the book is not just an inspiration, but actually really something to ask you those hard questions yourself, so that that your mindset has an opportunity to shift and see things maybe slightly differently, or have a bit of a mirror in front of your face to like be real honest, like if what you think you see is actually really what other people see, and that using that self-awareness, that new knowledge about themselves, and hopefully that energy that's generated in that process to then, in a positive sense, that's my biggest hope, that not a person is using it for the opposite. And it's really, it helps me phrasing it as a leadership book, because this is what I'm doing professionally, supporting leaders on at all levels, from like executive level to community leaders. But for the audience of the book, my hope is that people are not seeing it as something that's just relevant in a corporate workplace, that is actually quite useful for everyday situations. And that's where, all my stories about personal experiences in nature, pushing the comfort zone, I hope they're like also entertaining enough to make it really interesting for anyone to read, not just when you're in work mode.
I really appreciated how you do that. You were talking about all these wonderful and wild experiences that you were doing, and then how you can implement it into the boardroom or into the workplace or into your day-to-day life. And one question that comes from that would be, what mindset do you have? So when you were mountain biking from Cairo to Cape Town and you dislocated your shoulder, and what was the mindset that had you saying, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to put myself through this pain for the rest of the time, and daily it's going to be there with you.
what is the mindset that keeps pushing you to finish? Is it thinking, what will other people think? Does that ever cross your mind, or is it truly yourself?
It's not. I think if I had thought, what would other people think, I would have gone to a medical place, get an X-ray.
That's the right thing to do, probably. Your mother, probably.
No, for me, it was... So what happened was, as I said, I sacrifice is not the word I want to use, but I did so many choices. I made so many decisions in order to enable me to be on the African continent for a good 12 months. And I invested a lot of training, and I invested a lot of time purchasing all of this gear that I needed for this long 4 months, 12,000 kilometer journey. Because everything was new. Yeah, I had never done such a long journey. I had no kind of, I hadn't even owned a padded bike short. Yeah, because everything I did before, it was so short. Like, I didn't need that. Yeah. And so everything from like, oh God, all the research I had to do around like tire sizes. And it's ridiculous. Like everything, because we were very limited in what we could carry. So it had to be the right equipment. And so it was like so many months of preparation, so many like difficult decisions around resigning, putting everything in storage, giving up my place, and all of those things that then when I was on the African continent and I started cycling, I was like, but that's not what I'm doing. And then unfortunately, it was really in the first week, that's when I had a crash. And it was very strong headwind because we were all inexperienced. We were doing a peloton in order to help us with the riding. So people are behind each other, and every now and then someone in the front goes to the back so that the front person is not the same one doing all the hard work. And it's just because, we were all inexperienced, and it just happened that in this whole transition it didn't work, and the handlebars clipped and the two of us fell. And I have to say, like the other person, everyone was much more concerned about the other person having a concussion, because I think the adrenaline just made me jump up, and I was like, we're on a road, and every now and then those really high speed buses come through, and I was like, we need to get off the road. and so I think everyone, including myself, also underestimated a little bit that I had actually broken some bones. And I have a very, very high pain threshold. So compared to other people, like it requires a lot for me to experience pain. And I think that was also where I got mixed messages, because people were like, if it's not so painful, it's probably not broken. so it was a little bit more about that. But then eventually it became clear, like it had been already over a week and the pain didn't really recede, and I've been taking so much ibuprofen and it's still there, and I'm still like really just cycling on willpower. I kind of came to the conclusion I actually probably have a broken collarbone, and I don't know if I need to know, because I actually know already. So I don't know if I need to now like leave because where we were going, we were so far away from major cities. So going to a medical facility with an X-ray would have meant I leave the group for a long time. And I think once you left it, I don't know if you come back again. And I think it was a mix between, but I was just like, I had already been cycling for a few days on willpower. So I was like, it obviously works. So, I did a logical analysis. Like, I didn't just naively decide, I just continue, because then there was a nurse traveling with us, and the nurse, with the knowledge she had, it was kind of clear that if you break your collarbone, often they just put you in a sling, so it's not necessarily a surgery. And apparently it was also, maybe after a while, it gets also better with the pain. and so there was also a bit like the plan B. I could always, if it gets worse, I could maybe drop out later. But for me, it was more the curiosity of actually really seeing what's possible. But then also I had given up, so I had prepared so much that I was like, now, if something like this had happened in the very early stages of preparation, I could have decided for something else. But I was like, now I'm all of this hard work, and now I'm actually so like I have the feeling I'm missing out on the good part. So it was the mix of like, seeing how far I can do it, and how far my body allows me to go, and just having this determination. I was like, no, I prepared it all. Like this is what I had been looking forward to, and so I think that was more I was already way too much seeing myself finishing that I didn't even seriously consider that now is a time to just say no. So I think without knowing that this visualization kind of has happened. But for me, that was like a done deal. I signed up, so I'm doing it.
I'm going to make it to Cape Town, regardless.
So that was, I think, the curiosity is definitely the one thing. But the other thing was more, I was like, no, I don't do things half. Yeah, I'm like, no, I signed up for this. So, like, I mean, I signed up personally, like committed to it personally that I'm going to do this now. It's like, no, yeah, I'm going to do it.
Have there been any repercussions?
It's difficult to say because you never really know. When I finished in Cape Town, by then the pain had definitely receded. It wasn't so strong anymore, and the body is interesting because it actually had joint, but not the bones itself. It had like a lot of calcification. So there's this like layer. I'm not a medical, but so there was something holding my shoulder in place, but it wasn't the actual real bone connection. And so I had various checks, and the specialists were not 100% clear whether it's better to do a surgery or not. But then I ended up having a surgery then, just to ensure that I don't have later on in a few years later an issue. Maybe at the time, if I had like a proper sling with like stabilizing, maybe the surgery was not required, but you never know. So a lot of people have surgeries one way or the other. So in the end, I just had the surgery 4 months later.
Well, when you look back at the experience, do you think of the pain that you were in, or do you have all the other wonderful moments that were part of the riding to get you from A to B?
So when I think of the first 2 weeks, I definitely think of a lot of pain. But I also have to say, I think so the whole thing was such a sport experience that there were people who had done Ironmans, signed up for this, and they said it feels like doing an Ironman every single day because you're doing those like the first, in the beginning, we were like going through so strong headwind. So it was just, we were done by the end. Yeah. And the first day, actually, people had to be picked up because they didn't make it we were only allowed, as part of the organization, they only allowed us to cycle during daylight hours. And some people on the first day had to be picked up because they didn't reach the destination of the day because of the strong headwind. And then just after I broke my collarbone, I broke it in Sudan. And that was just before we went into the open Sahara desert. So there was a lot of shorter days, 70 kilometer days, but it was thick Sahara sand, open Sahara sand. And that was very painful, like going on roads. So where the accident happened was a very smooth road in Sudan. But then once we were in that thick sand where you actually have to use your upper body and you're using the suspension of your bike rather than a straight road bike. So that was definitely very painful. But it's more about the body was so exhausted, and like I think anyone it was a shock to the system for anyone in the first 2 weeks, because I say 2 weeks, really after 2 weeks, I have the same. I think my body was just from the physical activity of cycling every day. We normally every 5th or 6th day we had a rest day, but other than that we were just cycling from the morning to the end of the day, and it's just such a physical activity with all of like being exposed to the elements. There was a lot of heat. I mean, there were also days where it was very cold, but in the beginning it was all about the heat, the headwind, other food. In Sudan, everyone had like belly problems, that the food was just not sitting very well. And then when you're doing such a long day on the bicycle, and then your nutrition is just, you're either vomiting or having diarrhea. Like it's a lot of stress to the body. And we slept in tents. We had our own tents. So it's also not necessarily the most recovering evening. so that's where, my body was just completely, I think my mind and my body didn't know what the heck I'm actually doing to it. It's also like, even just when you see like what happens to the physical appearance, yeah, most people, we dropped so much weight in the first two weeks. Later on, then it's there's like some resilience and there some normality. It's suddenly, this is the new norm. Yeah, you're outside your, it's the typical growth zone framework thing. Yeah, you're in this one zone in the beginning, and then once you're out of your comfort zone, you're eventually in the growth zone, and then this is the new comfort zone. I think that's happened, and that's so this whole thing that there was, in addition to that, I had also the very like extreme pain in the collarbone area. I don't know even if my brain was able to distinguish what is now actually just a sore body and which part is now it's actually really painful. But sleeping in a tent, pitching a tent, getting out of a sports bra, that was like this whole movement of crossing your arms and lifting up a sports bra with a broken collarbone. That was, I need a lot of help, a lot of help.
Oh my gosh. And you pushed through it every day. Did you keep questioning every day? It's like, am I going to do this tomorrow? Or was it just by then you were just like, I'm getting to Cape Town?
So there's some people signed up as a race. And in the beginning, I was like, well, I'll carry a race chip, because I was worried that there will be days where I'm just losing motivation. And I thought, I'm a competitive person. So I was like, if I have this race chip, maybe this will help. The reality was then actually that I enjoyed it just so much. I enjoyed, and I didn't want to rush through. That's why some people didn't actually cycle from the first thing in the morning to the last thing in the evening, because they just wanted to be quickly there so that their time was accordingly measured. But for me, I was like, I enjoyed stopping in all the roadside stalls. If there were some, in places like Sudan, there was absolutely nothing. It was just deserted, because we had over 40 degrees during the day. So people were just hiding. Yeah, but if there was the occasional little shop selling Coke, yeah, it was just so amazing. Like stopping there and within a few minutes, we had like groups of 20, 30 people coming out of nowhere. And because, I mean, how alien is it that there's a group of cyclists in their very bizarre looking outfits going through? And I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed this whole being with nature, spending every single night in a tent for 4 months. And everything was so extremely simple, but also very structured in a way, because it was always the whole like getting ready in the morning was like all of those different steps. And then with the broken collarbone and taking the ibuprofen, and I had to always make sure first food, then ibuprofen, and then sunscreen, then the cream, the chafing cream you put into your chamois, and like there were all of those steps, and then packing up your tent, putting the tent in, and then actually cycling. Yeah. And then I think there was a lot of those kind of moments that helped, where it was just like, okay, I don't even question the bigger thing. I'm just going now step by step. And then sometimes those distances, they were scary. They were just so scary. And I remember I always rationed those, they gave us those terrible tasting sport bars. And sometimes they were so hard that you could barely chew them, which was almost a good thing, because you could really ration them and say, okay, this is what I can have now in those first 5 kilometers. And then I need to cycle 5 kilometers, and then I get the next one. So remember, I wanted to think about so many things and on the bike ride, and it was just impossible, because it was too strenuous. It was too strenuous, and there were too many of those smaller things to think about, like what to do the next 5 kilometers, that actually the bigger questions had no time. I think overall, I mean, in 4 months, of course, you get a lot of clarity, but on a day-to-day level, what brought me through was like really thinking of the
next 5 kilometers,
the next 5 or 10 kilometers, or knowing, there is like, I don't know, there's like a turning point in 70 kilometers. So, yeah. And then I liked it. And what I really liked was the moment I knew the daily distance was less than 42 kilometers, because it was like the ongoing joke, where I was like, 42 kilometers, people run this, we can cycle this.
In half the time.
Yeah, it's like, this is a marathon distance. It's like, people run this. So
Easy peasy.
now, this is manageable today.
A huge switch from your 10 to 15 kilometers on the mountain bike. Well, it seems a lot of your experiences are, you mentioned that the edge moments, it's not about pushing harder, but digging deeper. And so for other activities that you have undertaken, such as freediving, how did you come about to explore freediving and become having that as part of a central part of your life now?
I think it's really this R, yeah, the Boulder R. This revelation, which started with yoga and then things like the Vipassana, I think that's really where freediving fits in, to a little bit maintain my sanity, my mental sanity, because freediving is physical, but it's actually, in order for it to work, it's about relaxation, as you experienced, as you're currently doing the course. And how it all started was actually here in Timor. Because on my first year, I lived in Atauro, which is a small island here off the main island, and there was not so much to do. So in the mornings, I was always either snorkeling or running or being out with my mountain bike. And then I heard at the time that there was a freediving school opening up here in Dili, and I was just curious. I was like, oh, maybe that will help with my snorkeling. And I had a camera that I was quite keen on taking some nice underwater footage. And I was like, oh yeah, then I have a bit more time, maybe, if I know how to hold my breath for longer. So I guess it was again the curiosity, just like, oh, yeah, it's just something else. Yeah, let's just see what that is. And I had spent quite a bit of time scuba diving beforehand, and a number of years beforehand, I did a dive master stint where we were in a dive shop and for 3 months, and there were some freediving fins there, but no one used them. Like, it was just a bit like, oh, how bizarre. There's like people who use those really long fins. It was really not a thing. Yeah, I started freediving 10 years ago, and 10 years ago, it was not many people had heard or really an understanding of what freediving could be. And anyway, so that's how I got into it. It was curiosity to start with. And then as I did the course, first of all, I realized that I actually find it very easy and that I didn't have any equalizing problems. Before signing up, I was absolutely terrified that I may encounter a crocodile in the water. I think the whole thought that, I think a lot of people, when they think about freediving, they think about panic attacks of not having enough air, of going under. I never had that. That was never an issue for me. For me, I was just worried in this particular country, Timor-Leste, where I had just recently arrived. And all I knew was that around Dili, there's sometimes crocodiles. And this course was in Dili, not in Atauro Island, where there were no crocodiles. So all I was concerned of was just, can we do this somewhere where there's no crocodiles? I think, I didn't, there was no moment for panic. Yeah, I just had a really good time. I went down in this course to 20 meters. I didn't have a benchmark or anything because there were no other freedivers really there. There were 2 other people doing the course with me. We all found it quite easy. So I just thought this is how it is. And then I heard if you do another course, you may go deeper, and then you're going into a depth where you are in negative buoyancy, because when you're like up to 15 meters, you're actually in the positive buoyancy, meaning if you don't do anything, your body is just floating up to the top. And then depends how much weight you have on your weight belt and your body composition, but somewhere in those 15-meter threshold, that's when it actually switches. And if you go deeper, you're sinking. So you don't have to put any effort into going down. Just eventually when you turn around, you have to put a bit more effort into going up. And the way how my instructor described that experience, being a bit like in space, of just like flying, in the water, of course, I was just intrigued. I was intrigued by this, and because really I had just the whole reason I signed up was just to take good photos. and then he told me about this, like, oh, you feel like you're in space in the ocean. And it's like, in this 3-dimensional space. And I was like, okay, well, I found it easy so far. Let me just do this next course. And I found it again super easy. In that second course, I had for the first time a moment where I really appreciated what controlling your breath means. Because there was one session where suddenly I had a bit of a mental block, and I thought, it's probably I'm congested. I had air conditioner overnight, and all of this kind of like talk, why I can't go deeper. And he was a bit like, no, just relax. And I was like, you and your relaxation, yeah. And he's just look at the rope and relax. And it's like, what normal person looks at the rope and relaxes? I was completely like, come on, give me something real. Like, what is this? And then he told me like, no, just go to this other buoy and relax. Yeah, you told me this before. So I did that. And surprisingly, the next time I went, it was my turn. There was no pressure in the ears and there was no congestion. And I actually went down to those 27 meters or so that I had the line set without a problem. And for me, that was because I had done so much yoga where they explain you so much around how your breath is helping you with certain movements and how you should do certain things. But sometimes, I don't know, in a yoga class, the instructor in the front tells you inhale, exhale, inhale. No one controls whether you do the right thing. So I think sometimes I didn't actually fully appreciate the benefit of what actually doing it in the way it's instructed actually supposed to do. Whereas in freediving, you relax in a really good way, and then you take a really big inhale and you truly relax and you have a really nice breath hold. Or the opposite, you are having a monkey mind and everything is just burning through oxygen because your brain is consuming most oxygen. So your breath hold is really short and nothing happens. And then if you're tight, you can't equalize because everything is tight and it just doesn't work. And that was, really for me, this was such an applied, like experimental way of figuring out how actually controlling your breath and your mind through that, what it does and allow you to do, and how it's empowering you to go deeper just by doing this mind work, breathing and mind work. And that really, that set me up. And then I was just no stopping. And I mean, I had a few just from where I was, because I spent, after this first year here, I went back to New Zealand. There was not really anyone freediving in my immediate network, so I put it to the side. But then when I came back to Timor, I was like, oh no, I want to continue. And there was no school anymore at that stage. They had already closed. And so I ended up going overseas and to continue with my training. And that opened up a complete new world, because freediving is anything from people do underwater photography to here in Timor using it as livelihood, like actually you go and do spearfishing and you get fish, to the sport part where you're doing it on the rope, and or the competitive sport where you actually do competitions in order to do depth or other disciplines. Or there's this full spectrum. There's so many different ways of doing it. And then I traveled first to Bali, which is right close to Timor-Leste, and there's quite a thriving community, and there it was a lot connected with yoga, which for me worked so well. And then it just, you as with all of those international communities, like freediving now is, luckily, it's much, much more common, and there's a little bit more, I wouldn't call it mainstream, but more mainstream than it was 10 years ago. But you meet people, and people travel to locations to freedive. So you meet people who have been to other interesting places. So that's how I kind of found out of Dahab in Egypt, which is the absolute freediving mecca. And that's where subsequently I spent so much time in Dahab, and I'm definitely a bit of a Dahabian now. And I did all my instructor course there, and I got ready for my first competition there. And it just gave me the exposure to so many different ways of approaching it, but also kind of the two-way thing. Like, you put effort into freediving, but then also what it gave me back for day-to-day life. And once I was an instructor, I hadn't really planned on teaching as in a like offering classes way. It was more because there were no safety buddies in Timor-Leste, and I wanted to make sure that the people I go out with have a bit of a clue of, like, I felt a bit, we were all like the blind leading the blind. We were all like have done one course, maybe two courses, but that's like a freediving journey is like you do 4 courses and then you do an instructor course. So the first 2 courses is really just like baby steps still. So I had to think, I don't know, we don't really actually know what we are doing. Yeah. So that's where this whole idea came. Maybe I should become an instructor. So I feel a bit more confident of thinking our safety setup is okay and we know what to do if things don't go well. But then that the need in Timor is, I find in Timor-Leste is such a pristine underwater world. It's so amazing here. It's the bio hotspot. The biodiversity underwater is almost unmatching. Like there's a few in the wider Coral Triangle have similar biodiversity. But the reality is most Timorese have no idea because they can't swim and they have not had an opportunity to put a mask on. So they don't actually know. And for many years, I was leading a marine conservation organization, and there we did a lot of scuba dive based research. But it was impossible to allow every staff member to become scuba dive certified. But with freediving, there's also the introduction part where it's not so serious yet. You go into the swimming pool and you're just making this a bit more fun. And so that's actually the first people I taught. Whereas like as a team building activity, we went to the swimming pool and we tested us there. And then the second team building activity, we went to the beach, and those people who were swimmers, I could bring them out and we could do training on the buoy, and the others, they were preparing barbecues for us. And so it was a very, very nice, cheerful way. And that really started the whole idea of teaching, because I was like, and it's so much more rewarding knowing I'm teaching Timorese who otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to be taught, and contributing to having ocean advocates and ocean champions here who actually have seen the underwater world with their own eyes. And that's kind of how I'm here. And then 3 years ago, that's when a group called Underwater Cinema started. And they started out of a previous work colleague of mine from this marine conservation organization that I ran. He, as a passion project, he started that. But there's so many youth engaged in leading it and in participating, and they're taking out people snorkeling here at a local beach. There's some coral reef, and the core group showed an interest that they wanted to be taught in freediving, and that was I secured a bit of funding for them. An Australian travel agent, Reho, was like super helpful with getting them out, and that allowed another friend of mine, Laura, and myself to just cover the basics so that we could come back and do the registrations, and so we did the pro bono teaching. But we were also able to get them some equipment and some safety equipment, a defibrillator, those kind of things, and that's certainly, I was a bit more known that I'm teaching, and that's how it also spread around in the expat world, and that's how people who mountain bike with me find out that I'm actually also teaching freediving.
Yes. And I'm really looking forward to it and exploring more of it, because for me, it was about the mentality and understanding the body and having a better way to know how to be relaxed and to help that enhance my development underwater. But have you had any bad experiences from freediving?
I mean, I'm talking in my book as well. I had one blackout, and the thing is, as a recreational freediver, you should actually never experience a blackout. Like, you're doing a course in order to know how to do it all safely, and you always go with a buddy. So in case you are experiencing a blackout, you have a very safe way of getting out of it. So just so to kind of from a context point of view, is good, because when you're freediving, you're inhaling air. So there's about 21% of that is oxygen, and that is all you have. Yeah, you try to get, of course, a big inhale, so you have your lungs almost as 100% full as possible, and then that is what you have. And then you're holding your breath. And in the freediving sense, you hold your breath by being immersed in water. And normally your body's alarm system is in a way that it actually alarms you much, much earlier before your oxygen would get at so low that you are at a state where it's you're getting hypoxic, it's called. Because there's like your CO2, your carbon dioxide is building up, and your alarm system is the whole time telling you, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Why is there suddenly so much CO2 in me? So not under normal circumstances, you shouldn't actually experience a blackout. And then the more you're pushing and the more you're diving with your mindset, if your ego is there and your ego is like not listening to your body's symptoms and reactions, there is eventually a risk that you're actually pushing so much that you're staying in the water longer than that oxygen is lasting you. And if that happens, then something which is called a blackout occurs. And the blackout can happen on the surface, it can happen at depth. And what it is just a temporary shutdown of your body functions because the oxygen is not sufficient. The oxygen saturation or the partial pressure of the oxygen is not sufficient to supply your brain in a way that it normally does. If this is just a few seconds, and it's just one time, it's not a great experience, but it shouldn't have any long-term effect as far as the research that we have announced. If you're doing it repetitively, surely it will have a long-term effect because it's not something that your brain should continuously being undersupplied in oxygen. And that's why in freediving it's so important that you have safety divers with you, because if you have a blackout underwater, then if your safety diver brings you to the surface and 2 seconds, 3 seconds later, maybe let's say 5 or 10 seconds later, you're already inhaling normal air, then you're out of the blackout and you don't have any long-term consequences. But nevertheless, my philosophy was always that you're always staying within this safe space, that you should push yourself always gradually and incrementally, but not so much that you actually ever risk being in a blackout situation. And it is much more common that people black out in a competition because that is when your ego speaks. And that is, that's and I was a bit worried. I guess the same thing again. Like I signed up for this competition just because I wanted to see how it is doing a competition. And I thought, well, I'm an instructor. I'm coaching people who maybe want to sign up for their own competition. I want to have gone through this experience myself. That was actually my interest in signing up. And I was worried because for me, freediving up until that moment was always just this absolutely being one with the ocean, feeling freedom in a true sense, like just being in that space, especially on days when it's nice visibility and you can see the 3-dimensional space in all directions. And once you're like in this 15 meter and you're floating, you're not going up, you're not going down. It's just so nice and relaxing and refreshing and re-energizing. And I like to see the coral reef and the fish, and in places like here there's sometimes the whale migration and we see the really big the blue whales. And I was a bit worried what it will do if I'm now signing up for a competition and have a training plan and actually focus on this event. And in my case, it didn't work very well because I signed up in the same year as I did this long 250-kilometer run through the Sahara. And I think my mindset was not able to yet just really appreciate that I'm just doing this as an experience. Because I was still I had trained 7 months so structured for this Marathon des Sables, this ultramarathon through the Sahara. I had a coach, I had a program, I stuck to this program, and my mindset was not able to just switch into, oh, relax, you're just doing this for fun. I was just so used to this, okay, this is my training plan, this is what I'm doing, these are the steps. And I actually, in the process of getting ready for this competition, I lost the fun. I totally lost the fun. Like in the week that I signed up for this competition, I had suddenly equalizing problems I never faced before. And instead of, so I had said I would spend 4 months in Egypt to prepare for this competition. And my expectation was just, I'm going to Egypt, in the same year, I had just reached a 50-meter personal best. And I was thinking, I'll go to Egypt. And of course, 4 months. I've never spent 4 months on freediving. Of course, I will make more personal bests. That was just my expectation. But then I also decided to sign up for a competition. So now I had 2 expectations: increase my personal best and getting ready for this competition. And it just didn't work like this. Yeah, it doesn't work. It didn't work at all. Those expectations, the ego, it was just so in my way that I suddenly couldn't actually repeat the depth that I was very comfortable in just a few months before. And that's kind of where the whole this training, and then this like focusing on the training plan. And then I tried one coach, and I think that was almost more confusing than helpful. And then I tried another coach, and her approach was almost like too intrinsic, that I also had the feeling like, oh, now I'm even more confused. And I was like, I think those are actually not the questions I need to ask. Like, it's actually my competitive mindset that I still have from the running is like in the way. and that's kind of, that's a little what happened. And then there's different disciplines in freediving. And the most strenuous one is called no fins, where you don't have any equipment. It's a bit like breaststroke underwater. And people normally don't go so deep with no fins. So for me, because I had all of those equalizing issues at a certain depth, I was thinking, oh, maybe I just make the most of it and I train no fins, because no fins, I'm not yet at the depth where those equalizing issues were a thing. And when I was younger, I spent a lot of time swimming in clubs, and I did a lot of breaststroke was my discipline. So I found actually the no fins very easy, and I progressed very quickly, much more quickly than I did in any of the other disciplines before. And because there was the competition, the date was coming up, I think that was even pushing me even more, that I was progressing even more. And so I made a bit of a rookie mistake of, instead of just, a lot of people say first competition day, you should announce a very conservative depth, something much, much shallower than what you have done in training. But for me, I was just like on this success journey with no fins, that I was like, no, I'm announcing like the current depth, which was like almost like a meter maybe personal best. And I was going, no, I'm fine doing that. Yeah, and no, that was not fine.
That was not fine.
And I also underestimated, doing a training dive is totally different than doing in a competition. Like in a competition, there's a timer, and that's when you then need to do your big inhale and you go. It's in a training dive, it's up to you. You can take your time and you take your big inhale whenever you feel ready. In a competition, it's not like this. Competition, that's it. You have that time, you go down, all eyes on you, cameras, everything is there. And I made it to the surface. So I had a surface blackout, which I'm not surprised. I think when you asked me before about this collarbone thing, and so I was like, no. Like, once I have a plan in place, I'm following through. So I'm really not surprised. I made it to the surface, but then I blacked out.
Well, but not a mission. It's like, it's going to happen, but not until I'm ready for it to happen. But did you recognize all of this at the time?
No, not at all. No. It came, and this is to me, previously when I taught the safety procedures in a course, I was a little more relaxed about it, because for me it was all theoretical knowledge. And all of those, like recognizing yourself, the symptoms, how to get a blackout, none of that applied. For me, I felt really good. It felt like a really nice dive. And of course, I was a little bit nervous about it. It was a competition dive, my first ever competition dive. But no, I didn't. And then the interesting thing was, which I think is a little bit scary in itself, is the actual blackout situation. It was like being in a Disney movie. It was amazing. It felt like cartoon, like jungle cartoon animals were like going with their drums around, kind of all around, and it was like a party. It was a jungle party in my head, of course, and I didn't want to get out of it. And I had like this feeling that you may know from in the morning when someone is trying to wake you up, and maybe they already shake you, and you're just like, oh, like, I think I need to get up. And no, I'm ignoring it. And that's exactly what I had. And I think that was when they gave me the rescue breaths, because I was like, oh, this is so nice. Yeah, it's like I'm in this jungle party. And then suddenly I woke up, and I was a bit like, oh, why am I in the water? And why are all of those people around me? And then I was like, no, I'm in a competition. I think I've had a blackout just now. But then all of those, I don't know, I felt so bad. I was like, it was years of teaching and preaching the whole, oh, no, as a recreational freediver, you should never black out. You should never push yourself that much that you actually risk getting blackout. And really, like in a competition scene, someone having one blackout is I mean, no one is cheering, but it's very common, especially on the first day of a competition. You have a lot of blackouts because people are so nervous and they're not really relaxed. But in a competition, you have 3 people safety diving you. So if you have a blackout, you have it please in a competition, because there's 3 people. They know exactly like what their role is. There's medical staff on site. There's oxygen on site for you to breathe. So it's very safe. But I was just myself. My philosophy for freediving was that I don't want to experience this. Like I'm not one of them who's pushing uncontrollably to have a blackout. And so I felt terrible. I felt totally terrible. And then they have a mandatory rest day, and then the competition was always 2 days diving, 1 day rest. So in the end, I had 2 days rest. And I spent so much time with myself, and I didn't even want to engage. I felt so ashamed. I didn't want to go. And then the person who gave me the rescue, the rescue breaths, I was like, oh God, I don't even see him. I'm so embarrassed. Yeah. And it's a small community. Everyone knows each other. And I was just like, oh God, everyone. It's spreading like wildfire. Everyone knows now that I had a blackout.
Everybody knows.
And it was really, and it's really interesting because my body, like the medicals did all the tests, and then the day after the competition rest day, I was allowed to compete again. And I did as well. But it was just the mind is so. It's such an interesting thing because the mind needed much, much longer. And then I wasn't really sure what to announce now and how conservative should I now go. And I didn't do no fins. I did a different discipline where I should have been much more confident about easily being able to do it and not running out of oxygen. I didn't know at all anyway. I was so confused. It was like it was such a confidence, like losing confidence on all levels, and it was important to go back and do the competition. And then I had green cards, but it was also so shallow depth that I was a bit like, it would have been really embarrassing now not getting it.
I could do this in my sleep.
And it's really interesting. It's some people. I think because I had such an attitude towards this is not part of my philosophy. I'm a safe freediver. I'm not a kamikaze freediver. So for me to then actually first day in a competition and immediately having a blackout story, and I was like, oh, how and it's all about storytelling. So it needed a long time for me to get my story right. What's the narrative I'm using to use that. And eventually, I mean, really, it's interesting because like the actual diving and so it worked really well. But and it went through stages, like because then I left Dahab about 2 weeks after the competition, and then a few of those processing I thought I had already long processed my freediving blackout, but then it was. I think it was over a year later that I came back to Dahab for the first time, and it so much resurfaced. And then I saw that the person who rescued me. I was like, oh no, I think I'm getting emotional again. So it was actually quite surprising that I thought I was completely in a safe spot, but no, there was definitely a few things I was like, oh no, there's still a few things I need to face face the true.
Well, one thing from your book is that failure isn't final, it's feedback. So from experiences like this, I'm guessing that is where it came from.
Yeah, a lot. And in this one, it's also where with this one, it's also, it actually shows that some of the feedback is immediate. Like you can immediately learn something and can immediately change something. Even with that, I mean, the practical part was, I announced really shallow conservative depths for the next one, so that at least I have a positive experience and I come out with a few wins and really happy phases surfacing. So this was like the immediate feedback. But then the much deeper feedback, where it actually, I still kept on learning over a year later. It just shows like there's just, as long as you allow yourself the time to do the reflection, because otherwise it's not feedback. Otherwise it's not. Otherwise it's just failure. But if you actually allow yourself to reflect on it and what you can learn, then it's actually amazing, because it's learning and it's feedback that you can use to better yourself or the situation or anything. And then the other part is also then this reflection is giving you an opportunity to try to not take it personal, because that's coming back to this blackout story. I mean, in the beginning, I was really shaken to my core beliefs of how to do this sport. So it wasn't just, for me, it wasn't just something I had to brush off. Like some people are very relaxed about it because they've had blackouts in their training times. But for me, it was such a core belief that I wanted to be a safe freediver. And so it really required some deeper questions and deeper reflections on how to actually use it as a learning experience and be a bit trying to really see it also. Okay, so those are the environmental factors, and those ones are an easy control, so that in any future situation I can control them and do them differently, and separate and compartmentalize about this other aspect, and then really questioning about why is it so personal and what is in there to learn from you, like that it is so personal, and being a little more figuring out that you're actually not as perfect as you are.
What? No, that's not it, surely. It's very valuable learning. But then another one of your shifts that I wanted to touch base on was building the reef and daring to sharing, and I guess sharing your horizons and your experiences and your forward thinking to invite allies, to invite feedback, and to find unexpected resources. My previous podcastee, he felt very differently. So he had stepped out of the Australian Army and then he was working towards being a comedian. And he felt that for him, it was better to keep it to himself and to just forge ahead of his own accord, because otherwise people would ask him, what's your backup plan if this doesn't work for you? Did you ever experience that sort of feedback? And if so, how did you accept it or work with it or work through it?
So there's a few nuances to that. So you have to be a little bit strategic when you shout it out, how you shout it out, or whether you just actually tell a certain circle first. For example, coming back to this decision to cycle the length of the African continent, I was very quiet. I had made that decision long before I resigned. But also that was actually the first reason was I didn't want my work to know that I'm already having resignation plans, because the start date was much after the time I needed for the notice period. And then I needed to train with the cycling. I mean, people knew that I'm into mountain biking, but 120 kilometers is a different thing. So I was like, I think I need to now actually just start cycling to work. So that's what I did. And then I ordered all of those bike products, and the deliveries were always to work. Yeah. So I had this kind of a little bit like hush, like how do I explain all of those new interests of mine suddenly? Yeah. And Then I signed up for a 100-kilometer race on my mountain bike. Everyone else did it on road bikes. And I had to come up with like some creative ways of explaining why I did this. Yeah, because I was afraid that if I'm saying it too loud, that people will actually talk me out. And in a good way, like, I mean, in a meaning, like for them, like in a caring way. Yeah, and in hindsight, what happened in this work context when I did my they organized a really nice farewell morning tea for me, and that's when the manager of my manager was just saying some really nice words, and then at the end also like took me to the side and saying a few personal things, and he was just like, "Birgit, it's just so amazing that you do this." Yeah, he just had so many family commitments. It wouldn't be possible for him to take 4 months or even longer than out, but he just had only positive to say. That I did a little bit of unconventional decision of leaving a career behind and in order to test myself outside the workplace. And this conversation was one of the many of those where I was a bit like, oh, there are actually, you find people who can support you. And it was a person where I did, like, I often said, I think in Germany, I would never have had the guts to come up with this decision of cycling the length of the African continent, because you don't find those people. You don't find the managers of the managers who actually tell you that it's amazing, do that. So even that he told me already after I made the decision, yeah, but it just re-emphasized how there is actually, surround yourself with those networks, those communities that are, where you have the feeling they could actually support you. And so that's why, yeah, you have to be a little bit nuanced in like how much you're sharing it. But overall, my experience so far was always when I had like, it was past the seed phase, like not just planting a seed, but when I already had this thing, no, this is, I'm so excited about this thing, just not quite sure yet how to verbalize it. My experience was always talking to a few people. It always mushroomed out. Yeah, it always blossomed. Like there was the one conversation helped me to then find another person who was interested in that, or someone who had done something a little bit similar. They were always those like handing me down to other people who could help me with either with the decision or with then getting ready for the thing. So, and that was, yeah, and it really in all of those, it's like if I kept it to myself, it's just making it unnecessarily difficult to really brave the unknown. Because if you're, the moment it's said, there is also a bit of accountability in there, because you spoke already to one person. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to make it public and post it on your LinkedIn profile. Maybe just say it to a few people, test it, and test also how, if a reaction is coming back in a way that it's not 100% supportive, yeah? Also just so that you're actually prepared for that. But the more you're saying out the crazy idea, normally there is someone supporting you. And this L chapter, leveraging collective power, it's the longest chapter because it's all about humans, and there's so many different layers. It's just building the reef. There's just so many, because it's the one part is about yourself in the immediate tiny little circle, and then it's the next circle, and then it's the ripple effect that has. And then if you're bringing it into a leadership or mobilizing people, starting a movement in that sense, then you need to have those other people. You can't just be the solo person spearheading everything, because you actually need many, many voices championing the cause or the thing, or yeah, it's so, because otherwise it just doesn't work. Like, you're just one person, you're collapsing. If you're carrying everything on your own shoulders, it's too much. Yes, we need to have many people kind of support, like being aligned with the bigger vision, and then taking their little share of responsibility and accountability and carrying it out. And that's the whole how to mobilize and inspire people, because if they're genuinely behind it, and then also they're having some ownership and accountability themselves, that's how you're able to have the ripple effect. Because otherwise it just stays with one person leading it and eventually breaking because it's just too much to carry. And And so this was also the chapter where sometimes I found it really difficult to kind of, how do I draw the comparison between running through the Sahara and having so many people helping with individual parts, and then on the other hand it's like, okay, and then in a work context where you haven't, it's the vision is normally something that's already collectively agreed to, yeah. So if you're competing for yourself in the Sahara, actually others are more like helping you do something, versus if you're actually doing a change-making initiative or so, there is a common thread by people signing up for it because they believe also in that change that needs to be happening. But nevertheless, there were a lot of similarities in this, because from like a physical experience, running those 250 kilometers through the Sahara was really the most challenging I've done physically. And if you then, in addition to that, also carry like all of the storytelling aspects and thinking about I did most of the planning. I did most of the food rationing that happened beforehand, and buying the gear, and most of it I did myself. But I had also I had two coaches, one for the running, and then a friend of mine, she's a nutrition coach. She gave me a lot of advice and tested out a few ideas how to change my nutrition so that I'm up for it. And my sister stepped in and helped me in the last preparations with packaging up all of this powdered stuff into tiny little daily packages. And she was also because we had to label it so that the organizers know what I'm actually having. And any customs control officers, where we bring like powdered things in undefined little parcels. And she wrote always like motivational little messages on there, so that like when I'm consuming it, there's something, because everything is weight, so I couldn't like carry extra things, so but this had to be on there anyway. So, and I engaged someone to follow me around, filming me while I was running. I had my own GoPro, and it was like sometimes filming as I was running myself, and sometimes like doing a 1-2 minute update, speaking to the camera while I was running. But then on the other hand, it was so nice to have someone actually like doing it professionally, sometimes at major checkpoints. And once a day I was allowed to send an email out, because we were from the setup, like with the satellite phones and stuff, they just, every runner was allowed to send out in this IT tent one email. And I sent it always to my sister so that she could post it on my social media, because there was a lot of followers. And then they were able to send actually messages to the organizers, and they printed them out and sent them to, I got at the end of the day, there was a postal delivery with printed out messages of support. And also that was, I was the one running and I was the one preparing most for it, but I wouldn't have been able to do it with all of this support in the lead up and then during it, and getting all of those messages of encouragement and support in the tent at nighttime. It's a complete different thing, and that's kind of what makes you get up in the morning and think, okay, I'll stick to the plan that I have. But even if you stick to the plan, there's still some very tough moments. And it
helped having that support to help you continue on.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've already made a huge achievement this year, publishing your novel. But do you have any other extreme activities that you are in training for this year?
I really have to say, I a little bit underestimated what writing a book would take out of me. Mm-hmm. And at some stage I thought, okay, I'm just approaching it the same way as any kind of expedition event I did in the past. Yeah, because normally it had a defined date when it started. So I was like, I'll do it just with the book the same way. This is the date, and then I just work backwards. But because there was I did this. I had support from a book coach and a publisher, but it was self-published. So it was, in the end, it was my decision whether I maybe giving it a bit more quality time and spending a bit more time on it before I'm actually pushing the publish button. So in the end, it just took me quite a few months longer than I had anticipated, and it really drained my energy. also much more than I had anticipated. So from a physical expedition challenge point of view, I have a few things in the back of my mind, but I actually also have a few ideas around offering something where I'm hosting it. So instead of just doing my own challenge, actually doing something where I invite other people along. And there's some ideas floating about, but I think it just needs a little bit more time cooking. So that I have a clear idea how that could look like. Because some ideas more around combining it with underwater and freediving exposure, and the other one is more about running or mountain biking. So stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, in the meantime, where can we find your book and purchase it for ourselves?
That's actually depending where you are. So for people worldwide, it's very easy. Like my website, birgithermann.com. There's my book, the Boulder section. On there is the link to all of the Amazon websites where you can purchase it easily. For people in Timor-Leste, I know getting an Amazon book is very complicated and long. So in the next days, and when actually, the first boxes of books will arrive. So if people just reach out to me directly, I'll make sure the book reaches them, and then I need it. There's a few bookstores here, and I haven't had even conversations with them yet how this works if they want to have some here. So either find it on Amazon, find it on my website, or for the Timor-Leste.
Wonderful.
Find me.
Yes, I already have some people in mind that I would love to share it with. So it's going to be in the mail, however long that will take to get to them. But in the meantime, thank you for being curious and sharing your experiences with me, and for leading a bold life by design. It's been thrilling. And I look forward to more adventures with you, freediving myself.
Great. Thank you so much. Really, it's always nice to give a little bit more background of all of this, especially after, as I said, the last 7 months, I felt like being in a cave in my own little world in my head. And it's just really, it's nice that the book is now out in the world, but actually that I have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about what actually made it a book. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. I look forward to more. Bye for now.
I was really delighted to lean into this one. I smashed out Birgit's book and loved learning what she had to share with us from her very own experiences. And from that, ask yourself, when was the last time that you did something for the first time? As provoked by author and entrepreneur Seth Godin, if it scares you, it might be a good thing to try. Today, do one thing differently. It doesn't have to be dramatic, just enough to jolt your autopilot. And remember, when facing this, to pause, breathe, smile, choose, and grab a cup of blueberry tea while you are at it. I hope that you will be bolder with me at the next chat. Bye for now.